Oh, good. You're here. I'm so glad because today we're talking about how much of Project 2025 can be directly translated into Donald Trump's executive orders. But first, hello, my name is V, and this is my YouTube channel where I dive deep under the desk to find the crumpled paper trails of long forgotten history while also gently reminding you that when it seems like everything sucks, there is often a little light at the end of the tunnel. Buckle up, because we're headed back to Project 2025. So for now, let's do a quick lightning round where we're going to cover some parts of Project 2025 that hit multiple executive orders all at once. 1. Declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States, also known as clarifying the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States. Also, securing our borders. Also, protecting the American people against invasion. Also, protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. Also, designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations, and specifically designated global terrorists. So here is the TLDR on all of those orders, okay? The US is allegedly being invaded. The border is bad. There's no comprehensive medical or criminal background checks at the border. Cartels are bad. Anyone who is perceived as sympathizing with cartels is an enemy of the state. And fascism is good. Fascism is great. And immigration is basically done. It is over with and blocked via the Trump administration because of some extremely cruel xenophobia. Welcome back, Wall. Welcome back. Welcome back. Remain in Mexico policy, aka the policy that forced asylum seekers to wait outside of the border. So long to the CBP One app, which was the app that allowed people to digitally queue and put their information in so that they could be processed in a timely fashion. So long, catch and release. Welcome, good old-fashioned, harsher sentencing. Goodbye, due process. On page 147, it calls for a mandatory appropriation for a border wall system infrastructure, including border wall systems, technology, and personnel in strategic locations in accordance with the Border Security Improvement Plan. This is something that I think most people agree that a physical border, like a physical wall, is not one. Most people aren't crossing a land border when they're coming in this country, and a physical wall is something that can be breached, right? You can go over it, you can go under it. Do we not remember the El Chapo tunnels, right? It's like, come on. But he wants to invest all of this money into this physical thing that won't work. He also gets very jealous of other countries when he hears what America's doing for them. Like, he has a weird obsession with the Iron Dome of Israel.
Immediately begin the construction of a state-of-the-art Iron Dome. Build an Iron Dome. Build an Iron Dome over our country.
This missile defense system that the United States provides Israel, it's not actually an Iron Dome. You know that, right? It's important to me that you know that. It's not a physical structure. It's instead like a bunch of trucks with missile defense systems on them that when they see a missile coming in, they can like drive the truck to it, shoot our own missile off, and try to explode the missiles in the air. That's the Iron Dome. There's no, it's like the Iron Curtain. There was no curtain. Anyway, I'm not sure that Trump gets that, as now he's calling for the United States of America to have an Iron Dome. We don't need that because we have Patriot defense systems, which is double what the Iron Dome has. We'll do an episode on military technology in the future. It's very fascinating. Now, back to Project 2025. On page 149, it calls for stricter immigrant protection protocols, like the Remain in Mexico program. Also, asylum cooperative agreements, which is a huge review of the process in which people can even seek asylum. Page 150 says Congress should require compliance with immigration detainers to the maximum extent consistent with the 10th Amendment and set financial disincentives for jurisdictions that implement either official or unofficial sanctuary policies. This is where he wants to defund sanctuary cities. Page 151 goes a step further and flat out lists a number of executive orders Trump should take on day one. Like, they're not even hiding it either. They ask for orders like reinstating asylum cooperative agreements, bringing back the Remain in Mexico protocols, mandating that ICE uses all detention space and provides authority for low-level temporary capacity, I don't know, like a tent, once permanent space is full. They're like, you gotta max out the prisons and detention centers, and even once you do that, we wanna see you put some tents in the yard to get a couple more people in. And I'm not done. On page 166, they demand that the Department of Defense builds the wall and explicitly acknowledges and adjusts personnel and priorities to participate actively in the defense of America's borders, including military personnel and hardware to prevent illegal crossings between ports of entry and channels all across the border to any legal port of entry, which I think is like a wordy way of saying shoot people. I hope not, but that's that's what it looks like here. I mean, you get the idea. A massive chunk of Project 2025 is dedicated to cracking down on immigration to an unbelievably inhumane degree. And although Trump doesn't take it to the most insane degree suggested, he manages to make up for it by trying to kill the constitutional right to birthright citizenship. It's even worse for refugees. He wrote something called Realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program, which calls for a suspension of the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program for an indefinite amount of time starting on January 27th. This one requires the Secretary of Homeland Security write a report every 3 months on the state of refugees and whether the program should begin again. And this again is right from P 2025, okay? It's on page 177, where he says the federal government's obligation to shift national security essential screening and vetting resources to the forged border crisis will necessitate an indefinite curtailment of the number of U.S. RIP refugee admissions. The State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, which administers U.S. RIP, must shift its resources to challenges stemming from the current immigration situation until the crisis can be contained and refugee-focused screening and vetting capacity can reasonably be restored. There's another executive order called Reevaluating and Realigning the United States Foreign Aid. This is the one who cuts off funding for Ukraine for 90 days. According to Trump, the foreign aid industry and bureaucracy are not aligned with American interests and in many cases antithetical to American values. Now, amusingly, Marco Rubio is allowed to waive the pause for certain programs at his own discretion. For some reason, written into here is powers for the Secretary of State in case, I don't know, they don't like what the president's doing. And U.S. News said foreign assistance typically makes up less than 1% of the trillions of dollars in federal spending, which is kind of funny because it's like something most Republicans think will save us a ton of money if we just straight up stopped helping people in other countries, but it's less than 1%. Good job on the 1% jamboree. Now, this one's particularly interesting because foreign aid is the boogeyman of Project 2025, with the term appearing 32 times in the text in the context of war, goods, abortion, and more. The entire Agency for International Development section broadly defines U.S. foreign aid over dozens of pages, but summarizes it down to U.S. foreign aid is too often disconnected from the strategy and practice of U.S. foreign policy. Its coordination is made difficult as the aid budget is divided among approximately 20 offices, agencies, and departments that provide some form of foreign assistance. On page 182, it states another school of conservative thought denies that U.S.-Ukrainian support is in the national security interest of America at all, claiming that Ukraine is not a member of the NATO alliance and is one of the most corrupt nations in the region. European nations directly affected by the conflict should aid in the defense of Ukraine, but the U.S. should not continue its involvement. This viewpoint desires a swift end to the conflict through a negotiated settlement between Ukraine and Russia. This is what Time magazine would call a partial mirror, in that Project 2025 seeks to stop funding Ukraine's part in the Russian offensive altogether, but Trump did a 90-day freeze instead. Now, I really don't know what to make of that. I don't know if he's trying to just soften the blow here, but it's very concerning. Same can't be said for unleashing Alaska's extraordinary resource potential. With a record number of day one executive orders comes a record number of FU Biden orders, and this one's no different, right? Restrictions previously set by the Biden administration in regards to drilling in Alaska are totally dead, all in the name of extracting oil and gas, including within previously protected areas of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Now, the entire roadmap to reshape the Department of State gives away the game entirely in regards to why the United States would expand their Arctic footprint. Similar to what I said in my past video about why Trump wants Canada and Greenland, it's all about trying to control trade and the seas. Now, in terms of resources, on page 390, they outline a direct plan to expand AE operations in Alaska. And they say they got to do this for broader national energy security interests in the region, including rare earths, oil, and natural gas. Moving on to things that nobody will be helped by is Trump's executive order defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. This is an incredibly dramatic title, intended to sound more intelligent than it actually is. But basically, Trump has federally defined woman, girl, man, and boy. He's decided that gender is biological and binary and unchangeable. It calls for trans men to go to female prisons, trans women to go to male prisons, and it sneaks even more FU Biden language in by revoking Title IX protections that Biden laid out for trans folks. This is one of the single scariest executive orders for me personally, and of the entire package because it's the most immediately actionable. It also just goes after less than 1% of the population, which is our trans community. I watched a TikTok from Cyrus who said, please just let me talk to conservatives quickly. I don't exist to try and turn your children gay or trans or queer or anything. I exist so when your children decide that they are queer or gay or trans, they can see themselves older alive. And that really hit me. And a lot of what Trump is doing here is trying to completely destroy the existence or the representation of trans people. It's not that trans people are more likely to take their own life. It's that trans people are more of a target of the negative impact of some of the meanest things that people say and do. And that tends to have an outsized impact on our longevity. But the thing is, no matter how many executive orders he writes, you can't stop progress from happening. You can't stop people from being their true selves. And that's why I have all the faith in the world that people like Representative Sarah McBride, who is the first trans woman elected to the legislature, will have, again, a huge impact on putting a face to what trans people are and the work that we do and the things we care about. And so if you're a person out there who hears a lot of Trump's executive orders and spooks you out, just know there's a lot more people on your side than against you. All right, back to the game. We already covered this in the foreword of this document, but on page 62, Project 2025 bluntly states, abolishing the Gender Policy Council would eliminate central promotion of abortion. That's right. Cis women who supported the trans ban, they're coming for you too. It's all about controlling gender and what genders get to control the other genders. The reason why they don't like trans people isn't because we're trans. It's because we have more bodily autonomy than anyone else. And what authoritarians always want to do is control the idea of bodily autonomy. No, you have to fit in this box. You have to assimilate. You have to follow these arbitrary rules that other people set up. And trans people stand in direct opposition to that being necessary. They show that the binary doesn't have to exist. They don't like that. They also have a lot of bodily autonomy. They don't like that either. Back to this abolishing the Gender Policy Council, which they think would eliminate the central promotion of abortion. Comprehensive sexuality education and the new woke gender ideology, which has a principal tenet of gender-affirming care and sex change surgeries for minors. We know that's not true. And on page 104, what does Project 2025 say? Reverse policies that allow transgender individuals to serve in the military. Gender dysphoria is incompatible with the demands of military service, and the use of public monies for transgender surgeries or to facilitate abortion for service members should be ended. Do you see how they start by attacking trans people and now they're attacking women who need abortion care? It always goes together. On page 284, you get a little bit more of this. The next Health and Human Services Secretary should immediately put an end to the department's foray into woke transgender activism, whatever that is. On page 332, they go even more into it, saying the new administration must quickly move to rescind these changes, which add new non-binary sex categories to OCR's data collection, and issue new CRDC that would collect data directly relevant to OCR's statutory enforcement authority. These are all like, military terms, basically them saying anybody who's non-binary now needs to pick a side, which might not be possible. But the most egregious example is on the next page, showing that Trump ripped this straight out of Project 2025, where they claim we need to commence a new agency rulemaking process to rescind the current administration's Title IX regulations, and they meant Biden administration. Now, all that's going on in Project 2025's obsession with people's gender, in particular women, continues with the idea that the new administration should commence a new agency rulemaking process to rescind the Biden administration's Title IX regulations, restore the Title IX regulations put forth by then Secretary Betsy DeVos on May 19th, 2020, and define sex under Title IX to mean only biological sex recognized at birth. It goes on to say, work with Congress to amend Title IX to include due process requirements. Okay. What does that mean? Define sex under Title IX to mean only biological sex recognized at birth and strengthen protections for faith-based educational institutions, programs, and activities. You see how they kind of layer all this stuff on top of each other? Now, what would due process for proving your gender look like? That seems invasive. Next, it is just a short hop and a skip into hiring practices, okay? We get a pair of executive orders from Trump. First one called Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing, and the second called Reforming the Federal Hiring Process and Restoring Merit to Government Service. An elimination of DEI, accessibility, and environmental justice offices and positions across the federal government. That's all there is to it. That's what they're doing. And we've seen him do it, right? And it's very amusing to consider DEI radical and wasteful when a Fox News host who served in the Army National Guard is replacing Secretary Lloyd Austin, a former general, as the Secretary of Defense. Sure, merit-based, the best and the brightest, right? Lloyd Austin is a man who had 2 master's degrees. He was in the Army for 41 years, and not just on the weekends. He served at the Corps, Division, Battalion, and Brigade levels. He was awarded the Silver Star during the invasion of Iraq from 2003. He assumed the duties of commanding general of the United States forces in Iraq and eventually became the commander of the U.S. Central Command. He led the U.S. and coalition efforts to battle ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, but at least Pete Hegseth was on TV. I mean, same, right? Let's go to page 258. The next conservative administration should dismantle USAID's DEI apparatus by eliminating the chief diversity officer position along with the DEI advisors and committees, cancel the DEI scorecard and dashboard, remove DEI requirements from contract and grant tenders and awards, and issue a directive to cease promotion of the DEI agenda, including the bullying LGBTQ plus agenda, and provide staff a confidential medium through which to adjudicate cases of political retaliation that agency or implementing staff suffered during the Biden administration. It should eliminate funding for partners that promote discriminatory DEI practices and consider disbarment in egregious cases. So, what I'm hearing here is that the merit-based are so afraid of the DEI-based that they can't possibly compete. And so what do they need to do? Annihilate them. Which, let's be real, has kind of become a replacement term for the F slur and the N word, don't you think? Or women. Oh boy. Okay, so that was day 1 alone. It's a lot of friggin' actions, right? A lot of them that synced right up with Project 2025. And like Time Magazine said, it's 2/3. And I pointed out a few that weren't from the document, like the birthright citizenship thing, where he's just getting extra hateful and extra creative. Plus, I'm sure you could tell some of the actions came as a result of thin skin, like Trump's full mast flag order, where he did an executive order saying that the flags that were being flown at half mast to commemorate President Carter needed to be brought to full mast for his inauguration. Or in the case of Trump expanding the death penalty, it seemed to come as a result of not being able to overturn Biden's actions of commuting 37 of the 40 men on death row. He just, I guess, wants to kill more people, which, But if you need a bit of a silver lining that there are serious cracks in the armor here, there are actually a few key deviations between Trump's executive orders and some of Project 2025's language. For example, the January 6th pardons, in which Trump pardoned or commuted the sentence of every single insurrectionist who stormed the Capitol. On page 157, the authors of P2025 show great concern for the safety of none other than Kamala Harris. Quote, the U.S. Secret Service must be the world's best protective agency. Currently, the agency is distracted by its dual mission of protection and financial investigations. The result has been a long series of high-profile embarrassments and security failures. Perhaps most notably, its allowing of then Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to be inside the Democratic National Committee office on January 6, 2021, while a pipe bomb was outside. Despite the great size and scope of the January 6th investigation, this high-profile incident of danger to a protectee remains unresolved. They also want to know who the pipe bomber is? I guess we all want to know. This admission from Project 2025 of legitimate danger, in their words, to a political enemy of theirs is quite telling. Now, the pipe bomb mystery on January 6th remains one of the most alluring unsolved crimes of its day. To acknowledge that a politician of the opponent's team is in danger is indeed an admission of dangerous occurrences in one of our darkest days. Now, maybe you think I'm stretching here, and maybe I am. Now, Trump has not signed any executive orders that offer Kamala Harris any additional protection, and he did blanket pardon all of those people from January 6th, so this is a little place where there's a crack in the armor. Now, this is where I'm saying you're seeing the cracks in the armor. It doesn't mean that they're going to break up, right? But you're seeing a little bit of friction here, because how do you square letting all the January 6th insurrectionists out, including members of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers who were there they were supposed to do like a 22-year term, and the Back the Blue stuff. People are going to have to choose. I don't know how they square those things, but I'm sure they'll figure out a way. They've been sane-washing Trump forever on that side. Moving on just slightly to another place where Trump is at odds with the authors of Project 2025, and that is around the very dear to me topic of TikTok, okay? On page 5, all the way back in the foreword, The Project 2025 people say, consider our approach to big tech. The worst of these companies prey on children like drug dealers, get them addicted to their mobile apps. Many Silicon Valley executives famously don't let their own children have smartphones, but they nevertheless make billions of dollars addicting other people's children to their phones. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms are specifically designed to create the digital dependencies that fuel mental illness and anxiety, that fray children's bonds with their parents and with their siblings. Federal policy cannot allow this industrial-scale child abuse to continue. On page 12, they go a little further and they say, if you want to understand the danger posed by collaboration between big tech and the CCP, look no further than TikTok. The highly addictive video app used by, they say 80 million Americans, but it's actually like 150 million Americans now, is overwhelmingly popular among teenage girls and is in effect a tool of Chinese espionage. The ties between TikTok and the Chinese government are not loose and they are not coincidental. That is also not true, but a lot of what Project 2025 says is not true. On page 789, they say we need to ban all Chinese social media apps such as TikTok and WeChat, which pose significant national security risks and expose American consumers to data and identity theft. For more on Project 2025's extensive opinion on TikTok, you can go to pages 826 or 851. Trump kind of saved TikTok. He didn't really, but he did sign a 75-day extension and claimed that he doesn't really see the big deal with banning TikTok now, even though he's the one who brought the ban together in the first place.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok. We may be doing some other things. There are a couple of options.
He thinks that TikTok helped him win the election, and we have to let him think that. And so he says he has a soft place in his heart for TikTok. Not soft enough to actually reverse the law that bans TikTok, which is what we really need, but soft enough to give us another 75 days of scrolling. Now, interesting, this thing about TikTok is the most significant departure from Project 2025 that Trump has taken yet. It's also a significant departure from a lot of deeply conservative Republicans. Folks like Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio, they are really against TikTok, and Trump is really for it. I mean, when you think about the fact that Project 2025 does not call to ban birthright citizenship and Trump does, that's even like something that he and the Heritage Foundation are more aligned on, because both of them just want to kill the 14th Amendment anyway. So, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. So to conclude, for a man who once claimed he had nothing to do with Project 2025, this is a whole lot of executive orders, memorandums, and proclamations issued by Donald Jamboree Trump on his first day of the presidency, January 20th, 2025, that sound a lot like Project 2025 directives, right? Yeah, there is countless executive orders drafted around immigration, oil and natural gas production, the revocation of rights for trans Americans, the climate crisis, trade, all of that, just to name a few. All that stuff comes directly from language drafted by Russ Vought, Stephen Miller, Caroline Leavitt, Brendan Carr, and Tom Homan, people who, coincidentally, have prime positions in the now Trump White House. As reported by Time magazine, day one of this presidency saw nearly 2/3 of the 900-page Project 2025 document implemented or partially implemented on day one. Now, thankfully, some of the more egregious actions that Trump dropped on day one are either totally toothless, or they're bound to be held up, or maybe even downright turned down by the courts. But with that being said, most of what mirrors Project 2025 may actually hold up, because they were designed to hold up. Remember, the rescinding of birthright citizenship, currently being sued into oblivion on the grounds that it's unconstitutional, that one was not part of Project 2025. That's Trump's nonsense. But the dismantling of refugee safeties is in Project 2025, and that one is likely to stick. Much of Project 2025's text on immigration by design is meant to evoke a much more militarized approach to immigration. And with the National Guard being called to the border, that text is becoming a reality, just as it does with Project 2025's indefinite curtailment of refugees and limited asylum. These are some of the countless ways that Project 2025 and Trump's day one orders mirror each other. From Alaskan drilling to the dismantling of DEI, the blueprint is there, and it was used. Just like we thought it would be, just like we told you it would be. Time will tell on how effective a lot of this is going to be, but for me, it felt worth going through and looking at the text of each and every action made by Trump on day one. Some of his executive orders are so confusingly worded and without merit that even if the idea behind them is essentially like very chaotic, it's likely that there isn't a way to implement some of them in any way that wouldn't immediately see resistance from within. Until then, the best thing we can do is stay informed and continue to learn which of these actions are treatable diseases and which of them are terminal. Now, you can count me in as neither pessimist or optimist here. I'm a realist, and realistically speaking, even with the backing of Project 2025, there are still cracks in the armor that will slowly spread as the days go on, eventually breaking and revealing the vulnerabilities to which we can actually strike and hopefully stop some of this horribleness. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I know we just went through the day one orders, but if you've got any comments or things you want us to take a deeper look at, or you want a flag for the rest of the community that's watching, please do that in the comments. We're constantly learning from each other, and that's like really the best part of this job is I can take the time to do deep dives with Jed, but sometimes you guys catch on to something quicker than me, and that's great for us to be able to work together. Project 2025 is a nightmare. It's not the first time the Heritage Foundation has put forth a mandate for the conservative president. They wrote about 70% of the Reagan administration's orders, and they wrote about 80% of Trump's first term's orders. So we can expect that he'll probably hit that 80-90% this time around. Is there anything we can do to make it better? Yeah. We can stick together and we can call them out and we can be smart and we can continue to shine a light on the fact that he lied when he said that he didn't know what Project 2025 was or that he wasn't going to use it as his template for everything that he's doing. We can continue to shine that light out there and help people who maybe aren't as far along in their journey with civics and politics and government as you are, see the hypocrisy in what he said and what he's done. I also look to Project 2025 for what's coming next. If we understand that document, we can understand the direction he wants to try and take this country and try with the limited amount of power that we have left to ensure that our congressional representatives know they will be primaried if they support any amount of this. You can also remember that the things that they say at the federal government level are way up there, and you and I are right here, okay? So when they say something that hurts one of us, we stick together, we close the circle, we fortify, and we block out the hate. That's what we can do to protect our most marginalized, okay? And I'm committed to doing that, and I know that you are too. So we're gonna be okay, all right? You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Reels, and the Substack, which we put out 2 newsletters often. Definitely 1 a week, sometimes 2, if there's something special. That's a great place to stay up to date and get everything that's happening in an emergency situation. And of course, subscribe here on the YouTube. It really does help me fund the work that we're doing and make sure that we can continue to keep this information free and flowing for the peoples, all right? Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you later.